Penguin Random House Audio presents Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. This is the author, Sophie Gilbert. For all the girls, Lily most of all. And for Henry and John, who make things so much fun. Introduction. Revision, the act of looking back, of seeing with fresh eyes, of entering an old text from a new critical direction, is for us more than a chapter in cultural history. It is an act of survival. Until we can understand the assumptions in which we are drenched, we cannot know ourselves. Adrienne Rich, 1972. Woman is not born, she is made. Andrea Dworkin, 1981. In 1999, the year I turned 16, there were 3 cultural events that seemed to define what it meant to be a young woman, a girl, facing down the new millennium. In April, Britney Spears appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone, lying on a pink bed, wearing pink panties and a black push-up bra, clutching a Teletubby doll with one hand and a phone with the other. In May, a 60-foot-tall naked image of the children's television presenter Gail Porter was projected onto the Houses of Parliament in London, where fewer than 1 in 5 MPs were women at the time, in a viral caper to promote a men's magazine. And in September, DreamWorks Pictures released American Beauty, a movie in which a middle-aged man has recurring sexual fantasies about his teenage daughter's best friend. The film later won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. All 3 texts now seem to me suffused with a kind of winking, postmodern irony. Fuchsia satin sheets? A Teletubby doll to signal transgression? In the Spears profile, the interviewer weaves back and forth between lust, the logo on her baby-fat t-shirt he notes is distended by her ample chest, and detached observation that the sexuality of millennial teen idols is all just a carefully baited trap to sell records to suckers. The projection of Porter's image, executed without her knowledge or consent by a marketing agency called Cunning Stunts, was sold at the time as one big hilarious prank, while nevertheless seeming to affirm that women belonged in softcore photo shoots, not in government. In American Beauty, Lester's fixation on an underage girl is sold as a textbook midlife crisis, even as the movie itself turns the character of Angela into a highly eroticized floral centerpiece. At 16, though, I didn't discern any of this. What was obvious to me was that power, for women, was sexual in nature. There was no other kind, or none worth having. More crucially, the kind of power being fetishized in popular culture on the cusp of the 21st century wasn't the sort you accrue over a lifetime, in the manner of education, or money, or professional experience. It was all about youth, attention, and a willingness to be in on the joke, even if we were ultimately the punchline. I started thinking about writing this book early in the 2020s, in a moment when time no longer seemed linear, progress no longer felt inevitable, and every ugly trend I'd come of age with as a Y2K teen had looped its way right back around. Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign in 2016, followed by the explosion of testimony regarding sexual abuse and harassment that manifested as the Me Too movement a year later, made certain realities self-evident. The recreational misogyny of the aughts was back, this time with new technology, and a cult figurehead, Andrew Tate, who'd once appeared on the reality series Big Brother while under investigation for rape. Wives and girlfriends' tabloid obsession had been reinvented for TikTok, where doll-like women murmured in affectless monologues about living the financially dependent dream of a soft, feminine life. The body positivity movement, which had done its utmost to claim space for normal bodies in media and retail, was rapidly being shunted out of favor by the rise of weight loss medication and a whole new crop of women with whittled-down waists and jutting rib cages. Everything old was new again, and yet things were also darker and more disengaged. In 2022, the overturning of Roe v. Wade marked the most tangible rollback of women's rights in half a century. Culturally, the motif of the moment was impossible to avoid, and it seemed to pinpoint how small our collective ambitions had become. Women my age were suddenly trading friendship bracelets and decoding messages supposedly embedded in pop lyrics with the intensity of CIA cryptographers. We went on girl trips, traded girl talk, had hot girl summers and picked at girl dinners. In 2023, I put on my best millennial pink blazer, the one I wear for panel discussions, and stood in a line of women, all equally psyched to have our photos taken in an adult-sized doll box, as if a moment of visual solidarity could make up for losing our reproductive rights. The Barbie world, with its all-female Supreme Court and hegemonic femininity, only made it clear that we were all still playing with scraps of power. At the end of 2024, once again, a competent, accomplished, empathetic woman was beaten in the US presidential race by a failed businessman and convicted felon, whose platform was elevated by some of the most proudly vicious misogynists and white supremacists in modern memory. Who wouldn't want to be a girl again, given the alternative? So much of this malaise felt familiar. There was a moment at the beginning of the 21st century when feminism felt just as nebulous and inert, squashed by a cultural explosion of jokey extremity and technicolor objectification. This was the environment that millennial women were raised in. It informed how we felt about ourselves, how we saw each other, and what we understood women as a collective to be capable of. It colored our ambitions, our sense of self, our relationships, our bodies, our work, and our art. I came to believe that we couldn't move forward without fully reckoning with how the culture of the aughts had defined us. With this book, I wanted, from the position of a critic, to excavate how and why every genre of entertainment at this time, music, movies, TV, fashion, magazines, porn, was sending girls the same message, one that we internalized with rigor. I wanted to understand how a generation of young women came to believe that sex was our currency, our objectification was empowering, and we were a joke. Why were we so easily persuaded of our own inadequacy? Who was setting the agenda? Why, for decades, and even now, has virtually every cultural product been so insistently oriented around male desire and male pleasure? I didn't necessarily expect to find all the answers. My main goal was to reframe recent history in a way that might enhance my own perspective. But what became clear was how neatly culture, feminism, and history run on parallel tracks, informing, disrupting, and even derailing each other. I also became fascinated by the echoes, connections, repetitions, and trends across time and genres. They're still reverberating now, as we continue to seesaw erratically between progress and backlash. As I look back, all these trends and the culture they stood for now seem inextricable from the rise of post-feminism. Less an explicit ideology than a mechanism to attract media attention and sell things. Post-feminism emerged in the 1980s and 1990s as a reaction to women's activism, bolstered by the sense that second and third wave feminists were somehow inhibiting our collective freedom. In the New York Times magazine in 1982, Susan Bolletin observed that young women were suddenly disavowing a personal connection with feminism, despite acknowledging what it had achieved. A smear campaign against the women's movement appeared to have done its job. Younger women, Bolletin noted, interpreted feminists as being unhappy and shrill, even as they embraced the new opportunities that the efforts of other women had given them. Post-feminism was vague. It seemed to define itself mostly in opposition to a boogeyman version of feminism, encouraging women to embrace casual sex, spend with abandon, and be as stereotypically girly or overt.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?